I will always remember the day the aliens first came down to Earth. It was a Friday, an ordinary, unremarkable Friday. I was sitting in my little diner on the outskirts of town, lazily fanned with a rag because the air conditioner was broken again. It was hot outside, there were hardly any customers, and I was thinking about what to make for dinner. And that's when it happened. I saw the sky darken, as if someone had turned off the lights. The plate with my famous burger froze in my hands, and I didn't take my eyes off the window. There was a huge ship hovering over the city, so huge that it completely blocked out the sun. "It can't be," I whispered, setting my plate down on the counter. The ship wasn't like it was in the movies. No shiny surfaces or sharp edges. It looked more like a giant upside-down mushroom, with lots of glowing veins that pulsed like a heart. People began to gather in the street. The news immediately ran emergency broadcasts. Everyone was discussing one thing: aliens. They're finally here. And then a beam of light struck right in the center of the city. It wasn't frightening, more like a soft, warm beam of light, like the sun. Out of it came creatures. There were 3 of them. Tall, with narrow bodies and skin that shimmered with all the colors of the rainbow. Instead of eyes, they had glowing spheres that seemed to stare straight into their souls. They had no shoes on their feet, but instead of footprints, they left tiny bright sparks on the ground. Everyone froze. No one knew what to do. And then one of the aliens raised his long arm and said, "We came in peace." While the crowd came to its senses, I stayed in my cafe, watching the scene from the window. Honestly, I never thought I'd see such a thing. My mind tossed between panic and curiosity. The creatures didn't attack, didn't demand anything, just stood in the square watching the people. Finally, one of them spoke again. "We are exploring your world. We need to learn more about your culture, your way of life." And, as if hearing the thoughts of each of us, he added, "Let's start with your diet." The world seemed to freeze for a few seconds. And then, to my surprise, the crowd stirred. People started shouting out suggestions. "Try the pizza." Someone shouted. "We have the best tacos." Added another. "No, borscht. They should try the borscht." I sighed, looking around my cafe. Well, if they wanted to learn about food, why not? After all, I was proud of my burgers and fries. The next day, the aliens chose my diner to negotiate with. Don't ask me why. Maybe because the "best burgers in town" sign was shining too brightly, or the smell of frying bacon attracted them. When they walked in, I nearly dropped the spatula. Up close, they were even weirder. One of them was leaning against the counter as if looking at the menu. The other glided smoothly around the room, scrutinizing the plastic chairs and walls decorated with pictures of food. "What can we get you?" I asked, trying not to shiver. One of them nodded, and the voice came again, as if it were right inside my head. "We want to know what makes your planet unique. Show us." I nodded and decided to start simple. I grilled the burgers, added crisp lettuce, tomatoes, cheese. The smell of a fresh sesame seed bun filled the cafe. When I placed the plate in front of them, they stared at it in silence. Then one of them reached out a finger as thin as a branch and touched the burger. It immediately glowed for a second and then went out. "It's delicious," he said, not even taking a bite. Well, at least they're not spitting, I thought. Day after day, the aliens tasted different dishes. The cafe became a laboratory of flavors. I cooked everything I could: pasta carbonara, pies, fried chicken, even tried to make cheesecake. They analyzed each dish without using instruments, they just touched the food and seemed to absorb its taste. But one day they asked me for help. We want to taste more. But our senses are limited. Help us understand flavor through your point of view. And how do I do that? I asked, dumbfounded. Tell us the story of each dish. I began to tell it. About how pasta carbonara was invented by Italian shepherds using the simplest ingredients. About how my grandmother taught me how to make apple pie by adding cinnamon. About how the smell of frying bacon in the morning always reminded me of Saturdays at home. Each story made them more excited than the food itself. They listened intently, their glowing eyes seeming to absorb every word. Finally, they announced, "Food is not just food. It is the key to understanding your culture." The farewell feast was memorable not only for us, the people of the town, but also, it seems, for the aliens themselves. The day after they announced their departure, their ship was still hanging in the sky. This raised questions. People gathered in the square, wondering what had happened. Glum appeared close to noon, descending to the ground with the same grace as the first day. "We have a problem," he said. "Our ship cannot leave your planet." The crowd became animated, shouts erupted. "Are you stuck? What does that mean? Is it an accident?" Glum slowly turned his glowing gaze toward us. "We have encountered unforeseen difficulties. Your planet's atmosphere has had an unexpected effect on our power systems. It has now become our common problem." At an emergency meeting in the cafe, the aliens explained that their ship runs on a special type of energy that they cannot generate from local resources. "Your planet has many amazing energy sources," Glum explained, "but they are incompatible with our technology. We have noticed, however, that certain combinations of flavors in your food resonate with our systems." Everyone was silently digesting what they had heard. "Are you saying that food can launch your ship?" I asked. Glum nodded. "Not just food. We need a perfect harmony of flavors. It's not just fuel, it's art." And just like that, we were thrust into a new mission, to prepare a dish that could save their ship. At first, no one knew where to start. I gathered the best chefs in the city in a cafe, each bringing their best recipes. On the table were ingredients from all over the world, spices from India, fruits from the tropics, meats, vegetables, and even chocolate. The aliens helped by studying the combinations of flavors and textures. They tested each dish by touching it with their energy, and then either nodded or shook their heads negatively. "This is too bland," Glum said, tasting a traditional steak. "It's too intense," he added, touching a plate of spicy curry. By the end of the first day, we were exhausted. Cooking something that would appeal to creatures who don't even eat in the conventional sense was harder than it seemed. Glum suggested a new approach: focus on the emotions the food evokes. "We've noticed that your dishes evoke memories, emotions. Perhaps that's the key." It got me thinking. The best dishes I've made have always been tied to stories. Like the apple pie that reminds me of my grandmother, or the burger I ate as a kid sitting on the beach with my dad. "We need memories," I said. We began asking residents about dishes they hold dear. Someone suggested the soup his mother used to make on cold winter evenings. Someone recalled the taste of fresh bread he had eaten in the village at his grandmother's house. Each story brought something new to our menu. By the end of the week, we were left with only 2 dishes that the aliens thought had a chance of working. The first was a complex dessert that combined sweetness and bitterness, chocolate mousse with orange sauce and mint. The second was simple but deep in flavor, a stew of vegetables slowly braised in wine and spices. We served both dishes for sampling. The aliens took a long time to analyze them, their bodies flaring and shimmering. "Almost," Glum said, "but something is missing." The crowd gathered around the cafe fell silent. Suddenly a small boy came out of the crowd carrying a basket. "Try this," he said, holding out a slice of freshly baked bread with honey. Glum looked at the boy and took the bread. When he touched it, it froze and then flashed with a bright light. "This is what we were looking for," he said. We put it all together: dessert, stew, and a slice of bread with honey. The aliens sealed the dish in an energy capsule and sent it to their ship. The crowd held their breath as they watched the ship begin to shimmer. Its veins glowed, as if a huge organism had come into motion. After a few minutes, it began to rise higher and higher. Glum came up to me. "You saved us," he said. "Your tastes are as unique as you are." And, after a moment's hesitation, he added, "We will return to learn more." The ship disappeared into the sky, leaving us stunned. After their departure, life returned to its usual rhythm, but something had changed. My cafe was now famous not only in the city, but far beyond. People came to taste the very dishes that had helped the aliens recover their ship. They wanted to hear the story of the flavor that saved the universe, and I told it time after time. But it wasn't just a tale. I had evidence, their glowing dessert that they had left as a gift. It didn't spoil and glowed every night as a little reminder of what had happened. But after a couple months, strange things started happening. First it was the food. The vegetables I bought from local farmers started growing faster than usual. Tomatoes and peppers were brighter and more flavorful than ever. The grains I used to bake bread yielded unusually soft and fragrant pastries. The farmers were perplexed. "I've never seen anything like it," said Mr. Clark, my potato supplier. "These tubers grow in half the time, and each one is like a showpiece." Then the people began to change. Regulars who often ate at my place began to notice that they felt better. An elderly Joe, who always complained of back pain, stated that he could now run in the mornings. A young mom who brought her kids to lunch claimed that their allergy symptoms were gone. And then I began to wonder. One evening I was revisiting photos from the farewell feast. In one of the pictures, I noticed Glum lightly touching the stove. Could it be related to what was happening now? Had the aliens left something behind that changed our world? The next morning I went to the market to talk to a farmer whose vegetables had grown particularly fast. "Something in the soil has changed," he said. It had become more rich, more fertile. When I got back to the cafe, I started experimenting. Using different ingredients, I tried to reproduce the dishes we had cooked for the aliens. But the result was strange. The food didn't just taste good, it evoked strong emotions in people. Some began to laugh, some cried, and some suddenly remembered forgotten moments from their childhood. One night I heard a strange sound. It was a soft, almost musical hum. When I looked outside, I saw that a small, familiar-looking ship had appeared above the cafe. 3 men emerged from it, but it wasn't Glum and his crew. The new creatures were smaller, their bodies like smooth stones, covered with cracks that gave off a soft light. "We are the messengers," one of them said, his voice like the tinkling of bells. "We have come from afar, having heard of your achievement." They explained that news of the taste of Earth had spread far beyond our galaxy. Now other civilizations wanted to learn the secrets of our world, and most importantly, to taste our food. From that moment on, my life changed forever. My cafe became the first interstellar culinary hotspot in Earth's history. Every week, new guests arrived. They brought their ingredients, crystals that dissolved in water, powders that made flowers appear, or liquids that glowed like little stars. Together we created unique dishes that combined the flavors of Earth and other worlds. But as each day passed, I realized more and more that our food is more than just nutritional value. It's history, emotion, culture, all the things that make us unique. Once my cafe became known among the aliens, the real culinary diplomacy began. Now not only food lovers came here, but entire delegations from different corners of the universe. Each visit was like a cultural exchange, where the dishes I served them became a metaphor for our relations with other civilizations. The first delegation came from the planet Arlani, which was in one of the nearest star systems. The Arlani were beings who primarily valued the texture of food, and taste was secondary to them. They looked like tall, slender humanoids with translucent skin and glowing stripes along their bodies. Their skin changed color depending on how they liked the product. The first one I served was a salad with pomegranate, which to me was a symbol of unusual flavor combinations. On the surface of its peel were caramelized pieces of nuts and fragrant honey, and inside were thin slices of greens dressed with lemon sauce. The Arlans took their plates, and I watched their reactions carefully. Their bodies began to glow with a soft blue light, which meant satisfaction. But as soon as they began to chew, their skin color began to change shades, from blue to red and even yellow. Their voices sounded like musical chords as they began to communicate with each other. "This is wonderful," said their leader, Ilaz. "We never thought that texture and smell could be so important to the perception of food." I held back a smile, because until a few days ago, my cooks and I hadn't realized how important it was to get the texture of ingredients right either. After their visit, I realized that there is a whole cosmos of nuances between the taste preferences of different civilizations, and each culture perceives food differently. But the main thing I began to realize was that each new guest brought not only new recipes, but also his own vision of the world, revealing it to me in a whole new light. A month later, a new visitor appeared in the cafe, a strange creature, which at first I took for a joke. It was small, with huge eyes that had no pupils. Its body was like a sack, half filled with liquid, and it moved on several long tentacles. These tentacles did not move in sync, giving the creature a slightly clumsy appearance. "It's a xenoglot from the planet Terran 9, explained one of my guests, an alien who had visited us earlier. "He's a mind-eater. Its food is your memories." I was taken aback. At first I thought it was some kind of joke. But the xenoglot, whose name was Liar, really needed something deeper than just physical food. "It is important for us to let the food speak to us," Liar said, "so that we can feel the meaning of the food through memory." I don't need food like you do, but I can taste it through your thoughts and emotions. It took me a long time to figure out how this worked. But then I realized, he doesn't eat the physical food, he absorbs the memories associated with the food. He relives those moments when someone cooked something with love, when cooking became part of history. Realizing this opened up a new world in my work. I began to emphasize not only the flavor, but also the feelings the dishes evoke. How do I prepare them? What am I putting into the process? This became part of the soul of every dish I served. The fame of the interstellar restaurant spread not only among the aliens, but also on Earth. When it became clear that I wasn't just cooking good food, but creating unique culinary creations, competition arose. The space adjacent to the cafe was filled with new restaurants trying to bring something special, not realizing that the key to success was not in exotic ingredients, but in the ability to taste life through food. Local chefs started copying my dishes, but without what made them unique. This led to minor skirmishes when competitors tried to steal recipes. Although I continued to work, I knew that for true aliens it is not only the flavor that matters, but the very concept of a dish, its soul. So I decided to organize an interstellar cooking tournament. I invited the best chefs from other planets to prove that not every cuisine could be like mine. I knew this would be a chance to not only establish my credibility, but to tell the rest of the world that real cooking is more than just food. It's an experience that can't be replicated. On the evening of the day the tournament began, I realized that this was not just another contest. What was at stake was not only glory, but our unique approach to cooking. Competitors from all over the universe brought their most incredible recipes. There were dishes that had nothing to do with what we knew, like spices from black holes or a liquid that changes shape depending on the atmosphere. But the main thing I realized during the tournament was that each chef brought a piece of their culture with them, and the more I discovered these worlds, the more I felt that food can truly be the link between us and the cosmos. The competition started with excitement. Not only our emotions were boiling in the atmosphere, but also space technology. The tournament was organized on a platform that aliens had specially created in space, in Earth's orbit. The tables were arranged so that the chefs could work weightless. We were literally cooking in outer space, among the stars. It was both intimidating and exciting at the same time. All of the participants arrived on their own spacecraft that hovered near the platform. With each of them I experienced the particular climate of their planets. I had to adapt my cooking techniques given the lack of gravity and the special atmosphere. However, the atmosphere of the tournament spirit was so strong that all these difficulties seemed like a trifle. Every chef was ready to present their best dish. I was among the last participants, so I could not avoid excitement. I had to show that even a simple earthy meal could be truly unique. First up was a Korean chef who was making special soups that used activated black holes to create incredibly concentrated flavors. He circled a chamber of liquid and it literally began to glow, with stars bubbling inside as they disintegrated and dissolved into his soup. It was a sight that turned the concept of cooking upside down. Then came one of the representatives of the planet Flarno, who were famous for their plant-based dishes that could change depending on the emotions of the creature eating them. He prepared unusual salads filled not only with vegetables, but also with emotions. The ingredients of this dish literally reflected the feelings of everyone who touched them. And all this was served in transparent bowls that made the food glow and change depending on the mood of the audience. But none of that could outshine my first course. I decided to serve a combination of flavors familiar to Earth, in which each of the guests could find a piece of their world. I cooked an old-fashioned burger with unusual spices, but served it on a weightless plate to make it feel as if the food itself was floating in the air. When I added the final touch, a delicate sauce that began to shimmer as it hit the bread, I felt the entire room freeze. My dish absorbed the light, but there was something more to its soft hues. It was the flavor of the earth, its land, and its history. Each dish evoked strong emotions from the participants and the audience. The hall was full of energies overflowing into the space. Some aliens cried, others flew up in the air with happiness, and someone even started dancing with delight. But there was also a moment when one of the dishes caused real confusion. I was taken aback. At first I thought it was some kind of joke. But the xenoglot, whose name was Liar, really needed something deeper than just physical food. "It is important for us to let the food speak to us," Liar said, "so that we can feel the meaning of the food through memory. I don't need food like you do, but I can taste it through your thoughts and emotions." It took me a long time to figure out how this worked. But then I realized, he doesn't eat the physical food, he absorbs the memories associated with the food. He relives those moments when someone cooked something with love, when cooking became part of history. Realizing this opened up a new world in my work. I began to emphasize not only the flavor, but also the feelings the dishes evoke. How do I prepare them? What am I putting into the process? This became part of the soul of every dish I served. The fame of the interstellar restaurant spread not only among the aliens, but also on Earth. When it became clear that I wasn't just cooking good food, but creating unique culinary creations, competition arose. The space adjacent to the cafe was filled with new restaurants trying to bring something special, not realizing that the key to success was not in exotic ingredients, but in the ability to taste life through food. Local chefs started copying my dishes, but without what made them unique. This led to minor skirmishes when competitors tried to steal recipes. The xenoglotha's dish, which was served using its tentacles, created the illusion that it changed shape depending on how it was looked at. It appeared as something indefinable, like a massive cloud, but when you tried to taste it, it reflected your thoughts, creating deep memories. However, due to the nature of weightlessness, these memories became intense, causing guests to literally disappear for a moment into the past. I was shocked to see several cooks begin to lose themselves, as if consumed by their own memories. It was a strange and frightening force, the power of food that didn't just nourish, but was sucked into an emotional vortex. I had to intervene to help restore stability, and the aliens quickly organized a rescue operation. It was the first serious reminder of how dangerous it was to affect deep emotions with food, and why cooking should be an art, not magic. After several days of intense competitions, discussions and tastings, the moment came when the victory was announced. But the big moment wasn't just about winning the tournament. I realized that the real reward was that the food truly brought us together. Aliens who had previously been complete strangers to each other were now sitting around the same table, sharing experiences and laughing as they discussed their dishes. This tournament was not only about culinary art, but also about creating bonds that transcend everything, even the vast expanse of space. However, I did not win the tournament, despite the fact that my dish certainly aroused the greatest emotions. The winner was a Korean chef, whose dish became a symbol of the universality of flavors. But for me, the most important thing was not the recognition, but how we all managed to turn this event into more than just a competition. After the tournament, everything changed. My restaurant became not just a place to eat, but a cultural center for meetings of different civilizations. Earth became a recognized center of gastronomic diplomacy. Every alien who came to our city knew that unique flavors and dishes, created with love and respect, awaited them. The new relationships that emerged between civilizations were now based on an understanding of how food can connect rather than divide. The aliens, like humans, began to appreciate not just the variety of flavors, but the opportunity to share their heritage through food. It wasn't just a marketplace, it was a bridge linking galaxies. After the tournament, my restaurant became a magnet for explorers and culinary professionals from all over the cosmos. And I, of course, couldn't stand idly by. As I explored new ingredients, techniques, and cooking methods, I realized that worlds I had never known had much more to offer than I had imagined. My first experiment was using flavor absorbers from the planet Terrace, which I visited as part of an exchange. These mysterious creatures, known for their small and elastic cells that could be filled with any flavor, inspired me to create a dish that would change depending on the mood of the eater. With these absorbers, I could infuse each cell of the dish with a new, unique flavor, creating a veritable kaleidoscope of sensations. One day I learned about an exotic spice that was brought by representatives of the planet Edra. This spice, called stardust, at first glance was just a powder, but as soon as it was sprinkled on a hot dish, it began to float in the air, leaving behind a fluorescent trace. But the most interesting thing was that this spice affected the air, not the food itself. It turned the atmosphere around into an artificial taste, filling the space with subtle flavors that changed depending on a person's movement or emotions. This discovery shocked me. I started experimenting with different dishes, combining the spice with traditional earthy ingredients. The result was amazing. Now, every time someone came to my restaurant, they not only enjoyed the taste of the food, but could breathe its flavors. It was like gastronomic art that was palpable not only on the tongue, but also in the air. Soon I met alien explorers who offered me a new way of perceiving food, through sounds. Once on the planet Helios, I was amazed at how the inhabitants of this planet were able to combine sound vibrations and flavors to create new sensations. Their meals were served with musical accompaniment, where each sip or bite changed not only the flavor, but also the tone of the sound that accompanied it. Back home, I began working with musicians and sound engineers to bring this element to my dishes. Eventually, I created unique dishes that were customized to each person's taste vibration. For example, if someone liked spicy, the dish started to sound like sharp, tense chords. If someone preferred sweet, the sounds became soft and smooth, like gentle melodies. This added a whole new layer to the perception of food. One day, a mysterious traveler from the planet Ferga came to the restaurant with unusual ingredients, crystals that changed their shapes depending on the temperature. These crystals could be added to dishes and they transformed into completely different substances: liquid, gel, solid, and even gas. He demonstrated this on my pudding by adding the crystals to hot syrup. They began to melt and turn into a light vapor that filled the air around us, not changing the overall structure of the dish, but giving it an amazing flavor. This technology was a real breakthrough as I realized that it was possible to manipulate not only the flavor, but also the physical characteristics of food. Inspired, I began using these crystals in my desserts, creating dishes that could not only be eaten, but also inhaled, to taste not only through the tongue, but also through the breath. With each new encounter with the aliens, I began to realize how far cooking had come on other worlds. The planet Laros, for example, offered us its unique ingredients to create regenerative dishes. These foods had the incredible ability to regenerate cells in the human body. I began making soups and salads that not only nourished, but also restored health. Dishes that we once considered ordinary became real elixirs of longevity. People who came to my restaurant felt their energy and health restored after each serving. One of the first such soups I served was based on an extract of plants from Laros, their leaves activated by heat, and each sip of this broth literally filled the body with life-giving power. I never realized that food could be more than just a way to satisfy hunger. But with each discovery, I realized that cooking was a way to connect worlds. My restaurant became a place where not only people, but entire galaxies met. Flavor became a language that spoke to every creature, regardless of its origin. The new dishes I prepared became not just a culinary masterpiece, but something that connected humans and aliens, opening up new horizons. At some point, I realized that this restaurant was more than just a place to eat. It was a laboratory of flavors, where every recipe could be a discovery and every encounter a new experience for the entire universe. Each year more and more civilizations invited me to their worlds to be part of their gastronomic revolutions. My cafe became a symbol of how food can become a common language. We created dishes that combined everything from scientific ideas to the most subtle emotions. And each new recipe opened up more and more exciting vistas. Galactic gastronomy had become not just a fashion trend, but a real movement, and I was happy to be a part of it. I now knew that taste is not only about what we eat, but also about how we feel and how we share those feelings. After my restaurant became popular with the aliens, I began to realize that food can be not only a way to satisfy hunger, but also a tool for building diplomatic relations. It's not just food, it's a way to express respect, exchange cultures, and understand each other on a deep level. I once received a letter from representatives of the Peace Federation, a coalition of over 30 planets. They proposed a meeting on neutral territory where each of the participants could offer their best dishes to showcase their culture and ability to cooperate. This was not just a culinary event, but a true interstellar summit. My restaurant became the official venue for this meeting. I realized that this was not just a party, but a moment where I could contribute to the world and mediate between different worlds. Diplomacy through flavor is what I had to offer. On the day of the meeting, the restaurant was transformed into a space gallery. Each dish became not just a treat, but a symbol of what unites us despite differences in physical structure, culture, or language barrier. As guests began to arrive, I could feel the kitchen filling with tension, but also with great potential for making new connections. The first to arrive was the ambassador from the planet Amarna, known for its culture of pure flavors, where everything from food to clothing was supposed to be minimalist and completely unadorned. His dish was strikingly simple, oatmeal cooked with a secret ingredient of local grains that appeared to have an effect on the psyche, creating a sense of harmony. For the Amarna people, it wasn't so much the taste that mattered, but how the food affected their state of mind. He and I exchanged glances, and I realized that each civilization brought its own values and worldview, which they expressed through food. I was ready to accept that. His oatmeal created an atmosphere of calm and harmony, and despite its simplicity, it had a great impact on the rest of the meeting. Then came a delegation from the planet Scenaria, a civilization that, like many alien peoples, used food to communicate emotions. They offered molecular dishes that instantly changed depending on the mood of the person. It was an amazing demonstration of how cooking could be linked to inner experiences. One dish could be sweet, then it would turn spicy and then bitter, creating a whole spectrum of sensations that traveled through each eater's body. After a few days of discussions and sharing dishes, I began to realize that every ingredient, every dish carries not only taste, but also history, culture, and philosophy of the planet. This became clear when representatives from different worlds began sharing stories about their cuisines. I had to cook a few of my own dishes to show how Earth combines simplicity with richness of flavors. I decided to choose 2 dishes, one symbolizing our earthly love of home and tradition, the other symbolizing our desire to open up to the world and evolve. It was borscht, with its deep red color that symbolized Earth's life force, and a fresh vegetable salad that represented our adaptability and ability to change. The ambassador from the planet Veltrin, which was famous for its harmony between nature and technology, accepted the borscht with respect, gazing at its red color as if it were a symbol of the Earth themselves. He said that his planet had never used such rich ingredients in their dishes because they believed that such foods could dissect emotions. But it is these emotions, when realized and accepted, that become the foundation of true unity. The most important point of the meeting was that the participants not only ate each other's food, but also cooked it together. It was not just an activity, but a true process of creating unity. Each of us could offer something different, and then, joining our efforts, we prepared a cosmic dinner where each dish was a part of the other's world. It was at that moment that I realized that cooking is more than just food. It's a way of creating rapport and empathy. When we cook together, when we share what is important to us, we become closer, even if we are physically billions of light years apart. When the meeting ended, I realized that its effects would be felt far longer than we could have imagined. This was more than just a culinary event. It was a meeting of civilizations that were able to understand each other through the common language of food. I witnessed how food can be the basis for peace negotiations, how it can be the basis for shared values and mutual respect. A few months after this event, I was invited to different corners of the universe to organize new culinary summits where cooking became the basis for peaceful and fruitful negotiations. It was a long journey full of unexpected discoveries and cultural clashes, but I realized that it is through the culinary arts that we can find a common language that unites rather than divides. As diplomats from different corners of the universe began to meet at my restaurant and worlds began to come together on a culinary basis, I began to notice how much it was affecting our perceptions of ourselves, others, and the universe. I witnessed how these alien civilizations, which had previously been perceived as alien, suddenly became closer and their cultures more understandable. And not only did they change their perception of the world, but we humans began to look at the universe and our role in it in a new way. After all, what could unite such different peoples as music, art, and food? Against this backdrop, our customs and traditions began to seem much less important than before. We began to see each other as part of a whole, part of a vast, diverse cosmic network. The first changes became noticeable at the level of the universal worldview. We, the inhabitants of Earth, have always been proud of our unique cultural heritage, our traditions and achievements. But after we began to share our meals with aliens and learn to embrace their taste preferences and culinary approaches, we began to feel how closely connected we were to other worlds. I like to think it was a sort of cosmic awakening moment. Cooking became not just a way to satisfy hunger, but a symbol of our relationship to the universe, open, respectful, eager to understand and embrace the new. With each new cosmic summit, it became clear that there were common ground between cultures, if we looked beyond language and tradition. 2 years ago, I would never have imagined that Earth and civilizations from other planets could forge such deep, long-term relationships. But cooking proved to be the one universal language that could explain our basic values, needs and feelings. In one of my meetings with the Amisaran civilization, I realized that the most important thing we had in common was a desire for simplicity and honesty. The Amisarans were known for their minimalism. Their culture was based on the idea of purification and harmony. Their dishes were extremely simple, unadorned, but each one held deep meaning. They taught me that sometimes the simplest things can be the most powerful. This encounter changed my understanding of what is more important, external luxury or internal content. With each new meal, with each shared experience, I began to see so much more in myself and in people than I had before. We, as a human civilization, have become accustomed to excessive wealth and complex culture, but we began to realize that simplicity and sincerity are what is truly valued in other worlds. As I observed this new approach, I realized that our role in the intergalactic community was beginning to change. We are no longer just a separate planet, one of many, but an important part of a larger, unified whole. It was a moment when Earth was no longer just an original colony, but a bridge between different cultures and civilizations. Realizing that other civilizations, despite their uniqueness, experience the same human feelings, love, fear, happiness, the need for companionship, was a revelation to me. Earth has become a place where humans, aliens, and even strange space creatures can meet, understand each other, and share those feelings through gastronomy. And this was not only useful in terms of diplomacy, but also profoundly transformed the inner perception of humanity. On the planet Lazaro, where I recently hosted a series of workshops where delegates discussed the importance of cross-cultural exchange, especially in the area of food and flavors. The presentations showed how important it is to maintain respect for the culture of the other, but to be willing to be understood and heard. The land, through its traditions and openness, was an important example of how new approaches to cooperation can lead to peaceful coexistence and understanding. Suddenly, food became more than just a means to satisfy hunger or savor flavor. Our restaurant began to conduct experiments that explored how food could influence our emotions and even create energy flows. We began to notice how food could change not only our moods, but also our physical state, making us more open, calm and willing to compromise. It was this discovery that became the foundation for creating a new diplomatic relationship. We began to develop special dishes that could alter emotional perception. Using emotional spices and unique molecules from the planet Alzacon, we were able to create dishes that not only affected the taste, but also the inner state of a person, helping them to become more empathic and receptive to the opinions of others. And once this became known among the aliens, everything changed. There was no longer a need for long negotiations and complicated diplomatic sessions. Food became the element that could help us instantly understand each other and agree on the most difficult issues. We began to resolve issues not from a position of strength, but from a position of mutual understanding and respect. After several years of intergalactic meetings and culinary summits, I realized that cooking had become a much more important part of our lives than I could have imagined. We began to see ourselves as part of a much bigger picture, part of a multicultural and multigalactic community where Earth, though small, played an important role as a link. We were no longer an isolated world, but an important participant in a great and complex cosmic round dance. I no longer thought of humanity as the only intelligent civilization in the universe. We were now part of a living, breathing ecosystem of worlds where everyone, regardless of background, had something of value to offer. And in this incredible universe, food became the link that allowed us to not only share resources, but to open our souls to each other. My perception of the world changed. I realized that we are all different, yet the same. And if we continue to find ways to combine our differences, if we can continue to learn from each other, then perhaps eventually we will all become part of something much greater than just galaxies or even the universe. We will become part of the overall flow of life in which every flavor, every ingredient, every moment is important.